What if the chaos of our world isn't the end, but the beginning of something extraordinary? Reverend Gordon Keyler believes that we are in the
Excuse
midst
me.
of a
Oh,
spiritual evolution. Yes,
my name is Kyle.
Kyler?
Yes.
Okay.
I know
Thank,
it's not like it's.
thank you so much.
Yeah.
He believes we are in the midst of a spiritual evolution from fear to love, from ego to unity, and from domination to collaboration. In this episode, he invites us to reimagine our divine potential, rediscover the lost wisdom of Jesus, and embrace our role in the birth of a heart centered humanity. Welcome back to Happiness on Tap, where we explore the many paths to living a vibrant, soul aligned life. Your go to podcast for uplifting conversations that stir the heart and ignite the spirit. I'm your host, Leanne, and today I'm joined by a truly visionary spiritual teacher and guide, Reverend Gordon. Reverend Gordon is the senior minister at Unity Spiritual Center in Albuquerque, and his journey is as rich and soulful as the wisdom he shares. From questioning traditional Christianity at the age of 13 to embracing Unity's practical and empowering teachings, Gordon has spent his life on a quest for radical love, authentic spiritual truth, and deep human connection. In today's conversation, we will talk about what it means to move from Homo sapiens, the head centered human, and you're going to have to tell me how to perfectly pronounce that. Agapian? Is that one more time?
Homo agapian.
Agapian. To Homo agapian, a term he coined to describe the emerging heart centered human. While not yet a scientific classification, it captures the emergence of a new consciousness marked by compassion, collaboration, emotional intelligence, spiritual awareness, and radical inclusivity. This shift is especially visible in the rising generations. Let's welcome Reverend Gordon to the show. Reverend Gordon, it is so wonderful to have this opportunity to speak with you. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thank you, Leanne, and it is an honor to be here with you.
Well, thank you so much. Let's go ahead and dive right in because I want to share about your story and about everything you do. Your spiritual journey began at the age of 13 with some big questions. What were those early moments of awakening like for you, and how did it shape your path?
Well, I was raised as an Episcopalian up until the age of 13 and had been very active in the Episcopal Church. It was a wonderful community, very traditional for the 1960s, fairly conservative even for those days. And at the age of 13, I began seeing the world as many young people do at that age and wondering, why is it not the way they describe it in church? Why do people not act like they say they should in church? And I was influenced heavily by my grandfather, Gordon Hobbes, who was very much a metaphysician, explored other paths. He was nominally a Methodist, but he was very curious and very well educated himself. And we would often have discussions, as any 13-year-old does with their grandparents, I would hope. And I was really drawn to some of the ideas that he shared. And as we mentioned, when I was 13, I finished my communion training and all that, took my first communion, and then all of a sudden realized this is not my path. This is not, I don't believe any of this. In fact, for a time, I was flat out angry angry at Jesus, angry at the church, angry at tradition, because I saw the hypocrisy of it. And so many of the teachings just did not ring true. Like the whole idea that a child could be born bad, in sin, they said, and couldn't possibly go to heaven unless they were baptized and repented and accepted Jesus as their Lord and Savior. And I'm questioning, well, what if they never heard of him? Well, how is that fair? What's with this God that seems to have massive anger management issues? And it was about that time I started high school. And one day I was walking down the hall at school as a freshman, and there was a book somebody had dropped. It was laying on the floor. And so I reached down to pick it up, and it was a book I had never heard of and certainly never read it, Jonathan Livingston Seagull by Richard Bach. And now we consider that kind of a archaic book almost. But for a 13-year-old in the early 1970s, it was as a light went off in my head. And it got me searching. And so I searched and started studying Buddhism, Hinduism, Native American tradition, Islam, you name it, I delved into it. And out of my studies with that, by the time I was in my late teens, early 20s, I began to see that there was what we call a golden thread of truth that bound all the world's ideas, all the world's spiritual teachings. And that truth was not what was being taught really in any of the religions that I studied. I think Buddhism was probably the closest. Native American tradition, of course, was more earth-centered, and I do believe we need to incorporate more of that into our spirituality because we've lost our connection to the earth and to nature. So by the time I was in my early 20s, I was living here in New Mexico, and I had a college roommate who would get up every Sunday morning and crank up the stereo and go to church. I, being, young, was oftentimes recovering from Saturday night on Sunday mornings. I did not appreciate that at all. And I finally told him, I said, Richard, I will go with you one time to this church you're going to, and then please never wake me up on a Sunday morning again. Well, the church he was going to was Unity, and they said things that resonated with me. I thought, wow, here are people who think like I do. I didn't think there was anybody out there like me. And so I've been going ever since. We've evolved through the years, through the decades. We are now Unity Spiritual Center, which is so much more than a church, as I'm sure we'll talk about in a few minutes. But I have done everything from the toilet plunger to the senior minister and everything in between. And it's been a wonderful journey, and it has awakened me to really what is the spirituality behind all of the teachings of the great teachers the world has ever known.
I love that. I love that. I shared a little with you when we met. I had very similar issues growing up in the Catholic Church and not really feeling like I fit in or not understanding what was being taught to me, that was the only way. And so I left the church young at 17 and just, looked around to see what called to me and where I connected. Buddhism was always one that I connected very closely with also. And, just nature. Nature to me was something that called me in, that I could sit with in everything that I was questioning, seeking. And nature was there just to hold me and listen and maybe show me the way or open a door. And I think, also finding a group of like-minded people makes all the difference in the world. When you feel seen and heard and not alone, and you can share in all those questions, it really is welcoming more than we can ever really imagine. And
Yes.
Unity is a beautiful place. I mentioned to you, I was married at Unity at 18 years old. And so knowing for me that it was a place that I was accepted with my religious upbringing and my ex-husband's religious upbringing, that it was still a place that we were accepted to be who we were, and that our love was accepted and respected.
And that is true of Unity. We accept everybody unconditionally and enthusiastically. We are very LGBTQ plus friendly. Many of our ministers are part of that community. We believe that God and unity leave no one out. We are all divinely created in the image and likeness of love, and therefore we're all the same.
Thank you. Thank you for offering a place and having a place available for people to all feel that within themselves. Yeah. You describe Jesus as someone to be idolized, but as a model for divine potential. Can you share more about what that means and how it differs from traditional interpretation?
Yes, I think you meant to say I describe Jesus as someone, well, to be idolized, but not idolized in the traditional sense of the word.
Yes.
I do not believe, and I'm not the only one, I do not believe that he was the only begotten Son of God. I do not believe that he ever wanted or desired to start a religion or to be put up on a pedestal. He was a teacher and a way shower. He was a person who really struggled to return his people, which was everybody he spoke to, and predominantly the Jews, but also Romans and Africans, all the people that found themselves in his center of influence because of trade routes and things like that. He really wanted to show people the beauty of who they were, the truth of who they were. Think about some of the things that have survived in the canon gospels, sayings like, you are the light of the world. You are the salt of the earth. You are created in the image and likeness of God. He never said you are created a sinner. Actually, he would have not even used that word. It didn't exist in his day. Many of those were put in down through the centuries as things got interpreted and reinterpreted. He truly believed that we all have that Christ energy or that Christ spirit within us. As a matter of fact, his very name was not Jesus Christ. It was Yeshua Bar Yosef, or Joshua, son of Joseph. The word Christ comes to us from the Latin Christos, the Greek Christos. But before that, its origin goes back to Sanskrit. And the word was Krishna, which is also the root word of Lord Krishna in Hinduism. And it simply means the light or enlightened. So it was a title, not a name. And that title, he said, is my title, but it's also your title. In fact, there's that story in the Gospels about, Jesus, Peter is bugging Jesus about who are you, who are you, who are you? And they have this big conversation, and he finally turns to him and says, well, who do you say I am, Peter? And Peter says, you are the living Son of God, or the Son of the living God, depending on which version you read. And in the original Aramaic, which was the language that Jesus spoke, it is recorded that he turned to Peter and said, and so are you. Now, it got translated to, in the King James English, which they didn't speak, it got translated to, so saith you. But that is not what he said. He said, and so are you, which changes that whole teaching, that whole idea, because what it says is, we are all children of God. And his mission was to bring that back into the consciousness, to take God from up there and say, look for God in you. It's there.
Yeah, and you're right. I probably did misspeak when I asked the question. I think I said as someone as opposed to not as someone. But thank you so much. And thank you for, taking us back to where it originated, because it has changed in each reiteration. And I think taking us back to how it was meant for us is the best way for us to really connect to it.
You're right. One of the challenges that I had early on, and was fortunate enough to be led to learn how to read Aramaic and some of those other languages. I'm not fluent. I have to have my little dictionary and stuff next to it. But when you go back to the earliest extant copies that we have of the scriptures, and by the way, there were 42 gospels originally, and it was narrowed down to 4 at the Council of Nicaea and later councils. But if you go back to those original writings, you discover that what they call the Bible today bears little or no resemblance in many cases to those original scriptures. And many of the changes were made unintentionally. Aramaic is a much richer language, so is Greek and Hebrew and the Proto-Canaan languages. They're much richer than English, and they have many words that there is simply nothing that those ancient words translate to. So scholars down through the ages, or translators down through the ages, did the best they could. Yes, many of the mistranslations were intentional. As religion became codified, as the teachings of Jesus were made into a religion, a crafted religion, that was called Christianity. Jesus was not Christian. He was Jewish. There was no such thing as a Christian for almost 400 years after Jesus. As that religion developed and was codified and centralized, it became about acquiring power, and it became about controlling the masses. And yeah, things were chaotic. Sometimes, there's good in that, but oftentimes there's things that are not good, as we all know if you look at history. And so a large part of what we do in Unity, what I do, is look at the original writings and say, what was it he really said? Now, we don't know. There was nothing, as far as we know, written while he was actually still alive. Probably the Gospel of Thomas is the closest. But we can get back close to where he lived and look at the writings, and we see that his mission, I like to say his mission statement was, I have come that you may have life and have it abundantly. The challenge with that statement is, in our Western materialistic world, when we hear the word abundance, we think of material wealth. And what he was saying, I have come that you may have an abundance of love, an abundance of peace, an abundance of joy, an abundance of life. And I really truly believe that was his mission statement for all people.
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure. And it's such a beautiful way to be and not live in this monetary world.
Yeah.
If we can receive love and give love and be accepting and have joy and have peace, then we are abundant. We truly are abundant in everything around us and who we are. And it's so important to be that light.
It is. It is. We need more of that in the world today. And it's not about religion. It's about spirituality. That's why we call ourselves a spiritual center. It's about looking inside. Change comes from inside out, not top down. And that's where we're going to have the big work in the days that are coming, the days ahead. There's always the days coming, all throughout history. But if we really want to move to that next level of expression, that next level in evolution, then we have to start coming from within. And when you come from within, one of the things I've discovered through my life is, when you come from within, all the outer needs are met. It no longer is even a concern. Everything you need is at hand. And when we're in that flow of love, that flow of oneness, that flow of collaboration, that's a word that I think we need to get very active in our vocabulary now, is when we're in that place, everybody's needs get met. We can end homelessness, we can end hunger, we can end all of that, because we know there's more than enough to go around. The problem is in distribution. And when we're in that place of oneness, that is no longer a problem, because we're not afraid we're going to lose what we have. We're in a place of knowing there is more than enough for everybody.
Yeah, man, you covered a lot of things I want to kind of touch on. Collaboration, absolutely. That is something that has been a part of my life and my coaching and the creation of my podcast. The people that I work with and how I continue to work with them, as you and I talked about, some mutual acquaintances. When I launched my podcast and I invited in other coaches, it was to show that I'm not worried about there not being enough. There is more than enough need in the world for what we do. And the more that we can work together to share in what we do, the more people we can help. And, I have been working a lot very recently. In fact, this week, I worked with a holistic psychotherapist, and her work is predominantly in spirituality and from within. I also spend a lot of time working with my clients on that center as well, because when we look into ourselves, we recognize, we have our self-awareness. And then on top of that, all that external noise or external, the beliefs, the thoughts, the feelings that we may think we have that maybe really aren't even our thoughts, our beliefs, our identity. When we look to ourselves, we know who we are. And it also helps, to be in the present. And if you're in the present and you're with self, like you said, you're not looking for the outward acceptance. You're not looking, it releases anxiety because you're not so focused on the what if and the future, but where you are right now. And so, I love all of those things you talked about: being in community, being in collaboration with others, and being with self. Those truly are where I live, where I work from, and working with like-minded people.
Yeah. There's a power in that. That's why we have spiritual centers. That's why you have your team and your podcast. And the beauty of it is, with our technology today, such as what we're doing right now, our circle of like-minded people has gotten so much larger. We can connect across the world, across countries, across nationalities, across race, across religion. It's amazing what can happen and what is happening. More and more I'm seeing this. The old dominator consciousness is giving way to collaborative consciousness. And that idea that we are all in this together. And that when we are together, we're not operating from individual minds anymore. We're operating from a collective consciousness. And we each give our knowledge, our gifts, our wisdom, and we gain from each other. Jesus had that saying that if I am lifted up, I draw all others to me. That wasn't ego saying, put me up on a pedestal or anything like that. What he was saying is, anytime we lift ourselves up, or somebody around us lifts themselves up to a higher thinking, a higher consciousness, a new idea, it lifts all of us up with it.
Yeah. It makes us visible to others who are seeking that connection. And, I do the best that I can every single day to help connect people together. I predominantly work with women as a specialty for my coaching, but yesterday I had a gentleman on my podcast who specifically works with men. And I wanted to focus on what he does with helping men be vulnerable with masculinity and with getting the help that you need and being okay to ask for help. And, I love to be able to bring in people that maybe aren't special. We're not specialized in the same thing for that reason. And the more people that I can connect and bring in and have as guests, the greater the world's going to be, because we're going to give us all the opportunity to provide opportunities and information that's not always available, and knowledge and education. When I struggled with anxiety and depression and PTSD, I learned about so many wonderful modalities that I had never experienced that truly helped bring me to center. So that's what I want to share, is that there are things outside of Western medicine that are also available.
Yeah. Yes, there's what you do. My wife is a licensed clinical social worker and a life coach too, working with professional single women. And there's so much talent, so many great ideas out there, that the more we work together, the wider an audience that we can serve, the better. Here at Unity, we have, my minister in training. He takes care of more of the counseling kind of end of things, because that's his specialty. My dream is to have a whole team of us, that each has our own unique area that we specialize in. That's our gift. And that's what Jesus did. That's what the Buddha did. They surrounded themselves with people who had the skills maybe they didn't. Oh my gosh, I said Jesus didn't have a skill. That would be blasphemy in some circles. But he was a human being like all of us. That's why he had the apostles. And by the way, there were way more than 12 men in his inner circle. The women were written out largely, except for a few Marys and a Martha here and there. But there were women apostles who were just as powerful and just as important and just as influential to him as the men were. So we need this back in our society. We need this back in our culture.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I built a group together back in, I want to say last September, before I closed down my office, and I called it Choose Change. And I brought together 5 other alternative practitioners that all had an influence in my life, so that we could all come together and teach what is available, what they offer to maybe people who have never met with a death doula, who have never gone to an acupuncturist, or I had a physical therapist, a hypnotherapist, and herbalist, and a sound healer. And so, we all got to share our gifts. And that, to me, was like the most exciting thing I've done in my role as a coach, is to bring this group of people together. And we have unlimited resources now with the internet to create workshops and masterminds and pull all these people together as a cohesive group of educators. And so as I continue to grow my business and collaborate, that's the path that I want to continue to take, is to continue to bring people together as a group. And I would love to be able to have a physical location where we were all under one roof, so that, people could work with all these different practitioners in a collective. And I love, I've looked at your website and all of the wonderful things that you have there at Unity. So I look forward to talking about that, so you can talk about some of the great things that you do there. But I definitely want to talk, and I'm going to mispronounce it, Homo agapian, agapian.
Like
Agap-
agape, conditional love, heart love.
So what inspired that term, and how do you see this heart-centered human emerging in our world today?
For many, many years, 20 plus years, I was a Youth of Unity sponsor. Your audience may not know, Youth of Unity is an international organization. It's the only international youth organization ever declared a force for peace in the world by the United Nations. That was in 1994. And it's a youth-led organization. So these youth create the materials when they do their gatherings, their rallies, and things like that throughout the world. And they accept everybody, always have. And that, especially in 1994, that was really unique. It's still sadly too unique in our world today to have a group that does that. But as I watched them, I began to notice over the years that a change was happening. You may remember back in, I think it was the 90s, when we started hearing the term indigo kids and rainbow kids and all of that. I noticed there was a gradual shift happening in our young people, and that more and more of them were coming from a different consciousness than what my generation, I'm 67 years old, came from. We were, Homo sapiens has always been about intellect. It's been about technology. It's been about science. It's been about crafting governments and economies. And it's done very well over the 200 or so thousand years it's been on the 200,000 years or so it's been around. We've gone from the cave to the moon, I like to say. But I do not believe that Homo sapiens can go any further. I think we've reached the end because now we've extended life so long that we're overpopulating. We didn't have the consciousness of what's the long-term effects of what we are doing. How is it impacting our Earth, the planet we live on? How is it impacting each other? It's been all about get, control, dominance. And as I said, I'm not putting us down. I'm Homo sapiens, and our generation on back is. And certainly we've had a place in evolution. But as this new consciousness emerges in our young people, they come more from the heart. They're much more collaborative. I have a grandson who's 15, and I watch him and his friends. And yeah, there's all the typical teenage stuff that goes on. But behind all of that, they have much deeper conversations than we ever did. They're much more willing to hug each other, even the guys, It's fascinating to watch. And in conversations with them, they're at a different level. It's almost as if when we see them on their phones, it seems like they're not paying attention and all of that. They're just kind of waiting for us to get out of the way. It really is. And that kids with that mindset, that consciousness or heart set, I'm going to say, are increasing. They're getting more and more. And so I'm seeing that they are coming from a more heart-centered place. When they're working on projects and things, they're going, how is this affecting everybody? How is this going to look 5 years from now, 10 years from now? I never thought like that when I was a teenager. They're looking at the big picture, and they're looking at how it affects humanity and the planet as a whole. So I began to think, what's going on here? What's happening? Well, what's happening is Homo sapien is dying out, and a new species of humanoid, and Homo sapiens was not the first. It will not be the last. And so there's a new species emerging, and it's not going to be instant. It's not going to be one day that's it, and the new species is in charge. It's gradual. It's a gradual evolution. If you're familiar with spiral dynamics, we're spiraling to that next level. But I believe our purpose is to help midwife that new species, is to help birth that new species, to help them get their feet on the ground and then get out of the way. And so I coined the term Homo agapian. I may have heard it somewhere, but I don't remember. And I've used it so much now. I put it out there and say, if you're comfortable with that, use it. I think it's a good term. It speaks to where they come from and what's happening. And the other thing that is happening is that when anything is dying out, it goes out kicking and screaming. And I think a lot of the political and economic chaos we're seeing in the world right now, and the resistance to change and the resistance to growth that we're seeing, is a result of that. On one level, all of us want to have safety. We want to have security. And if we're not in that right level, not right level, but correct level, I guess, of consciousness, where we're able to accept change, when we're able to say, yes, this is good things are happening, we react from fear. And we want to cling to what was, to the good old days, which is a lot of what we're seeing happen. And I have great empathy for people who are in that, because I understand the fear. It's the fear of, people are going to take what little I got. And they don't understand this idea that there's more than enough to go around. No, we're not going to take what you have. We're actually going to help. And so I understand the fear. I understand the chaos. I understand the wanting to be in absolute control of life. And so we have political chaos. We have what we see happening in the world today.
And I think faith is, a big part of accepting what we know to be true, what we know about change, and that change is the one thing that's always going to happen. And it may be fearful. We've all had our own level of fear over different things. I know the pandemic was really hard on a lot of people because it was such a major change that most of us had never seen in our lifetime. And I allowed that fear to take away my faith and my belief in myself and what I knew to be true. But remembering my faith, my belief in myself and what I knew to be true was what would get me out of that fear. And so, we have to remember those things, and we have to remember what's inside. And that a lot of it is just noise. What may be happening today may not be happening tomorrow. But if we're focused on where we are today and take time to step outside of the noise and see the beauty of this amazing world that we do live in, and that there is love and beauty and kindness that exists, then the noise isn't so loud.
That's true. When we're in that understanding, we can look beyond what's occurring to what's on the other side. And we realize, I've studied history a lot. And one of the things you realize is that there are always these times. We saw it, pre-World War II and during World War II, Civil War era, about every 100 years, roughly, when we go through a process similar. The pandemics are roughly every 100 years. It's part of that cycle, I think, but we always have emerged at a higher place. And, evolution's kind of up and down. The trend is up, but you have those down times as well, too. You have the tough experiences when change is happening. And when we are in the right consciousness and the right understanding, we can become a part of what is making that other outcome possible. I do believe that what we are going through right now is not pleasant. It's not good. Many, many people are being so horribly impacted by it. We know that.
Mm-hmm.
But we can be part of creating something better. And yes, there will be resistance. Yes, there will be challenges. But what a great time to be alive. I tell people all the time, I truly believe we are here in this now moment because we chose to be. Yeah, we are here because we can be the ones who hold the light. We can be the ones who say, this is not right. This is not how we want to be. And we can be part of getting through all of this mess and creating something better on the other side.
Yeah. And I'll take it back to, the pandemic gave us this technology that allows me to sit in my house and you to sit in your office and have a conversation that's going to be heard all over the world. That is our ability to make change.
Yep.
And
Exactly.
so I was working in a law office when the pandemic hit, and we continued to work in office. We weren't working from home. We were still working in office, and we had to learn this technology. I had never heard of Zoom, but my attorneys still needed to work with their clients. They still needed to appear in front of judges. There were still hearings happening. There was still trials going on. And being at the forefront of that technology and having to learn it in a moment's notice and realizing what a blessing the pandemic was in certain levels in technology. Yes, we lost my father-in-law during the pandemic and we couldn't be there with him. And those things were different. But we learned how to stay connected, even though we couldn't be connected in the same way we would have been had it not been during a pandemic. I think it shows us what we're capable of.
That's true. I look at it when the pandemic hit. I was living in Joplin, Missouri, and very small community there. And I was the minister at the Unity Church there, which was very small. And, we had 20, 25 people on a Sunday, and that was it. And we were kind of unique in that part of the country, I have to say. We're a little more mainstream here in Albuquerque. But when the pandemic hit and we began using the technology we have available, we were fortunate because I was familiar with Zoom before the pandemic, and so we were able to pivot pretty quick. But our congregation now is, I think we're around 300-400, but not in the building, not here. There are people all over the world that are part of our community now. We have people regularly from overseas, countries that you hardly ever even hear of. I do know they exist. But and they get to not only watch and hear us, but they get to send us information. They get to share their ideas. And what a wonderful opportunity that is to come together as a global community.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. It's such a blessing that we have this technology and the ability to connect with so many people who maybe can't leave their home, or there's just so much we can do with the gifts that we have today. I do want to talk to you about, and you mentioned like humanity as a whole is in the process of this spiritual evolution. I know that I am always in a spiritual evolution. I am always learning and growing, and I think it's great. I hope more people can do that. What signs do you see also in the younger generation. You mentioned it a little bit, and I got to be the blessing of being very involved with my son as he did 8 years of Boy Scouts. And, in the beginning, they didn't want me around. They didn't want women to be around. They wanted it to be that male led organization. But it took a little bit of time to then not only be welcome, to be accepted, to be a part of teaching these boys these skills. And we had 8 years. I had 6 teenage boys in my house every day, eating us out of house and home. But to watch the men that they grew up to be, to watch what they learned and how they could help the community and all of the things that we were doing in the community, as well as preparing them for their Eagle projects, and just to see the light within them and the excitement of what they were doing and planning to benefit our community. So, what other things do you see in our younger generation that show this shift is already happening?
Oh, I see it in a lot of the social media stuff they do. Um, we look at them and they're on their phones and we think that's a waste of time and everything. But I know that the youth I'm involved with and have been involved with, a lot of times when they're on their phones, they're communicating and building community with other people their age around the world. My grandson will sit and talk to me about his friend in Africa and his friend in Japan. And, they may never meet in person, but they're building a global community. They know each other on a deeper level than we would have ever been able to do using telephones or, what little technology we had growing up. And oftentimes didn't build even when we were in person, because we had these roles had to fit precisely into. I was a Boy Scout. You mentioned Boy Scouts, and I've watched the evolution of that. And I'm just so grateful that they were finally able to open up to, now it's I think it's just called scouting now. Um, I've taught at a school for children with learning differences for many years, kids with ADD, maybe on the autism spectrum, things like that. And each one of them had these gifts that in the right environment they were able to bring out. And one of them in particular I'm thinking of, who was on the autism spectrum, was part of a Boy Scout troop. It was an explorers troop that was all kids that had learning differences. And there was a place where they, both boys and girls, where they were with people who faced these challenges and also had the gifts that they shared. That's one of the big things that's changing. Our youth are much more accepting of each other that's different, with differences. If they're I hate to use the word handicapped anymore, but if they're handicapped, if they have a learning differences, if they have different languages or different cultures, it's no big deal anymore. We have a family member who is trans. She grew up as a he, and when she came out and formally transitioned, I watched her with all the cousins, and it was like no big deal. It was like not even a thing.
The adults that make it a thing.
Yes. And they just totally accepted her, and it was like, well, we kind of knew all along. Um, so there's that acceptance, that radical acceptance that I'm seeing more and more of. And I think that's where the big difference is going to be, when there are no more differences, when we're all just people expressing who we are to its fullest. And that's the biggest thing that's happening, I think, with this younger generation. And because that is happening, each person will get to shine their light, will get to share their gifts. Every person has a gift. And when they get to share it, things change. one of the examples I use is climate change. Okay, we created climate change. At least I believe we. And guess what? If we created climate change to be hotter, we can create the solution if we allow each other to share their gifts. I know the solution's out there. We just got to wait for it to and empower the people that have the solutions to express them. And the solutions to homelessness, the solutions to hunger, they're out there.
Yeah, and there's so many people out there that want to be a part of that.
Yes.
And, you know, helping them to have their light shine, not be kept quiet or a low light, from the political sense. You know, if somebody's there and they're offering a solution, don't shut them out because you think your solution's better than theirs. You know, sit down across the table from somebody and truly listen, with an open mind and an open heart, and figure out how we can come together to build a better world.
Yeah, and the other thing I'm noticing too is, I mean, people are people, and there's young people out there that are, you know, into drugs and gangs and violence and all of that. But when I talk to them and to other young people, I'm thinking of one incident in particular where I know a young person who was being bullied at school by some of these kids. And I was talking to him and he says, "But Grandpa, you got to understand." Oh, I just slipped who it was. He said, "You got to understand, they live in a place where they either have to be in the gang or they get killed or they don't survive." And you know, that they can see this and understand it and recognize that maybe we can show them something different.
Yeah. Yep. My grandson was bullied, so I understand, but I see his heart and I see the future that he has in him to help change that.
Yeah, I thinking of two other kids, and I'll try not to slip this time who they are, but these kids grew up in a very tough environment. And by the time they were teenagers, they were tough and they were probably headed for prison. But they started making friends with some other kids who had this understanding, the Homo agapian understanding. And they grew up, one is an indigenous rights attorney now, fighting for indigenous rights around the world. The other one started a company that sells legacy seeds and plants to bring us back to healthier, more holistic ways of eating and growing and farming. So what can happen is, and what I'm seeing happen, especially with our young people, is that they're willing to reach out to these kids. They're willing to say, "Hey, we understand, we get it, but it doesn't have to be that way."
Yeah. And it just takes one person.
It does.
It takes one person to share that light. I had a conversation with a gentleman at our church on Sunday who was very concerned about his grandson who had been in an accident and was really struggling with depression. And I said, "Well, when I get home, let me send someone to you. Let me send you some information for somebody that I listen to, that is now an influencer, but his circle of influence is called the School of Greatness." And
Oh, I love it.
listening, you know, his story, just like most people, came from a rough road. When he was young, his father was in an accident and received a traumatic brain injury that he never recovered from. But this gentleman had also been preparing his whole life to be a professional football player. And right before getting signed, was playing for the American Football League and crashed into a wall and shattered his arm. And was told he'd never play again. And so, you know, you sink into these depressions and these beliefs and forget what is possible. And so every day when I listen to another podcast episode or look at something he's doing, it reminds me of what is possible from where you have given up all hope. Or, you know, he eventually lost his father, but his father was the person who sat on the sideline with him while he was growing and learning football. But he still loves his father and will honor him every day. And so I shared his information with this member from the church and said, you know what, here's his story. Because there was actually a link that I could share that was his story. And I said, share this with your grandson. Hopefully it will help him find his own path. And that today, what he's going through is not his future. It's just what's going on today. And so I think if we can all just take that minute for that conversation, although I was like, oh no, now I've got to run, services are starting. You know, I was like, but I didn't regret that conversation. And the minute I got home, I pulled that information and sent it off to him, because that was my way of sharing that light, that possibility with somebody that's sitting in darkness.
Yeah.
Let's talk about, you have an idea of original blessings. There are so many out there, and it is so beautiful and so healing. How can we live from that truth in a world that often emphasizes shame and separation?
Yeah, that's a big one to overcome. The teaching that has come down through the ages in Christianity is the idea of original sin. That was not anything in any of the ancient scriptures. It was not, well, it's not even really in the New Testament. It was an idea that emerged mostly in the Middle Ages. We believe in original blessing. Simply put, we are created in the image and likeness of God. And that image and likeness of God is love, health, vitality, life, all of that. There is nothing that we were created, nothing bad about how we are created. In our true spirit, and I believe we are more than this physical body we occupy. This is just the vehicle we use to move through this particular life. In our truth, we are whole, we are complete, we are perfect. Our job is to get into that consciousness, to number one, accept it, which is a biggie, because for 1600 years, our religion has told us, no, you are not that. You are born in sin, you're horrible, you have to earn your way back into God's good grace, because like I said, God has anger management issues. That's not the God we believe in. We believe we are created in the image and likeness of love, plain and simple. So there is no such thing as original sin. There's only original blessing. And we are here to experience life, to express life, to be love, to be joy, to be peace. And we've got a lot of unlearning to do. That's part of a large part of what we do here at Unity Spiritual Center and all Unity Spiritual Centers. When we were founded, our founder, Charles Fillmore, wrote that we are the continuation of the great educational movement inaugurated by Jesus the Christ. Now, I stress the word continuation. It didn't end with Jesus. It didn't end with Charles Fillmore's writings or Myrtle Fillmore's writings. It's continuing. We're coming into a fuller and fuller awareness of not just the teachings of Jesus. He took ancient teachings and just brought them into the language and understanding of his time and his culture. The Buddha did the same thing. Every great teacher the world has ever seen has done exactly the same thing. And pretty much every great teacher has ended up dead. It was not good. But I think we are at a place in history where the world is ready to hear, where people are ready for this. We look at the thousands of years of the other teaching we've had. And, you know, you have to ask yourself, why do we still have war? Why do we still have poverty? Why do we still have disease? Why do we still have prejudice? Why do we still have all these things we say we don't want and that we say every great teacher came to solve, and we still got it? And I think if we can get past religion, if we can just get that out of the way and go back to the teachings themselves, the teachings of the Buddha, the teachings of the Christ, the teachings of the prophet, the teachings of, you name it, whatever teacher you resonate with, they're all saying the same thing. And if we can get back to that, we can solve the problems that have arisen largely because of the ideas that were changed and transmuted, and the religions were built around these teachers. Not one of, well, maybe except for Muhammad, not one of them came and said, I'm going to start a religion. And Jesus certainly never said that. He never said, become a Christian, because there was no such thing. He never even said you had to become Jewish. And people, one of the things I think people don't understand about Jesus is when he spoke largely to his own people, which were the Jews of the kingdom there. But there were Roman soldiers who practiced the Roman religions. There were Greeks who practiced the Greek religion. There were Buddhists, because where he lived and where he taught was where the trade caravans entered into the Roman Empire. So there were people from the East, there were people from India, there were people from Africa, Northern Europe. All these different people heard these ideas. And basically he said, follow me, which what he was saying is follow these teachings. Doesn't matter what religion you are or are not. Doesn't matter where you're from. Doesn't matter what culture you're from. These teachings are universal. And essentially they were love one another, love creation and the creator. And if we really got that, we wouldn't even need the rest. You know, there's this big push to put the 10 Commandments in classrooms and places like that. And I'm there, what about the Beatitudes?
Mm-hmm.
What about the Four Noble Truths? Come on, guys.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so much more to just one side, and to be open, and just to go back to the core, our core, and be accepting and kind and live right.
Yeah, if going back to the 10 Commandments and the Beatitudes, if you think about the 10 Commandments, they're very authoritarian, because that's the culture of the time, and the understanding of the time is what was needed. But then Jesus came along and said, no, those are great, but love one another and love God. Really and God is all of creation. In fact, you can't love God if you don't love one another and yourself. That's a biggie, because Christianity, especially the Abrahamic religions, we're all about shame and blame, and we're low worms. And yet Jesus said, no, you're the light of the world. And so we have to get past that idea that was put out for 1600 years and get back to love your neighbor as you love yourself. You can't love your neighbor if you don't love yourself. And that's a large part of what happened, why there's so much strife between races, between different sexual identities, different gender identities, different religions, different politics. Before we were Democrats or Republicans or gay or straight or Protestant or Catholic or evangelical or whatever, we were divine beings. We were created in the light of love.
Yeah. Just go there, stay there.
Yeah.
Let's talk about unity and the community, the spiritual space, everything, all of the wonderful services. Can you talk to all of the things that Unity has available?
How many hours do we have?
as many as you need. I know
Okay.
that's a lot. I spent a long time looking through the website, but it's so beautiful that there is so much available.
Yes, thank you. Unity is about spiritual education. That we have a service on Sundays. It's not like your traditional church service. You will hear an entirely different message. And yes, we do have some great music too, and we do have a meditation time and all of that. But we are more than that. We are about education. As I said, our founder, our co-founder, Charles Biltmore Myrtle, was his wife was the other one. They looked at the Christianity of the late 1800s, early 1900s, which was their time period, and they posed the question I posed earlier: why is this not working? And they, in their studies, began to realize that Christianity was a religion about Jesus, but Jesus' religion was the teachings of Jesus, the ideas, the principles. And so what we strive to do is get back to those principles. We are built on 3 pillars: prayer. What we call affirmative prayer is quite a bit different. It's not begging and pleading and expecting God or Jesus or somebody to come down out of the heavens like Santa Claus and fix everything. It's about finding that power that Jesus said we have within us. And prayer doesn't change God's mind, it changes ours. Gets us to that place of understanding. So prayer, affirmative prayer, education, these teaching, these ideas, these principles, and they do work. They truly do. Getting that understanding that we have all that we need within us, that we have the light within us. We are not meant to be poor, miserable little worms, struggling through life. We are meant to be the light of God expressing. And with all of that means. So prayer, education, and healing. We have many classes, but we also have Tai Chi, we have yoga, we have support groups, we have diabetes support group, we have a gay men's support group, we're looking to have a women's support group, a lesbian support group. We really are an educational and a healing center. That is what we focus on. You mentioned the idea of having a healing center where there's all different modalities being practiced. That's my vision. We need a bigger building. I'm building that vision to the next bigger space so we can create that. But not only have it in the building, but have it available through technology, through reaching out to smaller communities and going to them and, having sound healings, meditation practices. Meditation is powerful. It really is. Yoga, Tai Chi, HIV support, diabetes support, teaching classes and groups that work on nonviolent communication, about bridging these gaps. Education can take so many different forms, and for youth and children as well. We are very big in educating youth and children with these ideas. Can you imagine your child growing up with the message from birth that you are beautiful, you are wonderful, you're wondrously made, that you have all of this within you? We tell our children every Sunday at the end of service, you are a perfect child of God, and God and I love you exactly as you are. Can you imagine growing up with that message instead of you're a sinner? So we're about education, prayer, and
Healing.
And healing.
I love it. I love it. And
Yeah. Go to our website, you'll see.
I believe my daughter and her wife and my grandson are going to start attending Unity. And I think my grandson needs that so much. It is something, of course, that we tell him, but with, years of bullying in school, I also had my own time in church where, I was considered a sinner because I was young and pregnant and, all those things. And when you start your life so young, believing you are sin or just not accepted. I know my daughter struggled growing up as well, not from me, but from those others around her that judged her for her choices. To know that there are places where they can feel accepted and loved and cherished and raised up 100% for who they are and the light within them.
Yes, that's one of the I counsel people quite often who come to Unity from um, more traditional churches and church trauma. Oh, that's a big one in my field, helping people get through that. And some don't. It was so deep and so painful that they can't. Fortunately, many can.
It is possible.
It is, yeah.
It is very possible.
And we have that. Just let me plug this too. Is
Please.
we have other times when we gather together that are not, like a church service. One of the things we have going on right now is what we call Soul Share on Sunday evenings, and it's not a service at all. We sit in a big circle and we talk about what we're struggling with, and for most people now, it's what's going on out in the nation and the world, and so we explore that and what spiritual principles can we use. It's not me up there talking for 20 minutes or whatever. It's back and forth, it's sharing, it's very casual, and very interactive.
That's wonderful. I know that I really enjoyed the 3 years of my business when I was in an office, having a women's circle and providing that safe space for us to come together and learn together and grow together and share together and all feel welcome and accepted. The gentleman I spoke with yesterday, he has a men's circle because he wants to promote that safe space where men can come together. And we talked about, he was still kind of trying to find his core clients, his choice of where he can share his gifts. And I was telling him, even here on the nightly news now, you see more and more first responders that are coming out and saying, I'm struggling. I need help. I want to learn and be a better person and get the help that I need, as well as sit beside someone who is also struggling. So there is so much that we can do and share that education and information. Part of my education also is advanced nutrition for diabetes, for heart health, and for weight loss. So, having areas or places that we can share that education virtually, and not just in local communities, but the more people that we can help. And
Yes.
so, I'd like to be a part of the growth of Unity and providing those services
Got room for you.
to the world as a whole. I think it's great to be in a place where you are accepted and where you are around like-minded people.
Yeah. And by the way, you mentioned men's and women's group. We have those too.
Yeah, I saw all that. In fact, so did my daughter. She's like, oh, that really helped, seeing that acceptance and inclusivity, and because she's been searching for a long time. So
I'm just
happy.
going to put this out there just to give you an idea of how different Unity is. We just had we do an annual fundraiser because it does cost money to do all this. And our fundraiser this year was a drag queen bingo. And it was hugely successful.
Wonderful. Wonderful. That
you
is
ever get you're in the Albuquerque area and you ever get a chance to go see Sister Jessica, do it. It was fun.
If someone is listening today, and I'm sure there are, who feels overwhelmed by the chaos of the world, what's one spiritual tool or practice that you would offer to help them reconnect with their own power and peace?
First, take a breath and breathe. Turn off whatever media is giving you anxiety. Media is a two-edged sword. It can be used for good. It can also create a lot of stress. And understand a lot of what you're hearing is not really what's happening. It's not the truth. There's so much garbage out there. It's very difficult to discern what's fact and what's not. There's a lot of fear being generated because oftentimes when people or groups of people are trying to get power, they feed on fear. And, fear is a necessary part of it. So if that's what's creating your anxiety, stop. Just stop. You'll hear what's going on anyway, but understand that there's something bigger unfolding. This is just the chaos we're going through as one way of being dies out and another one gives birth, is being born. And if you don't have a meditation practice, that is one of the most powerful tools there is. Mindful meditation, Vipassana meditation, whatever kind you do, just don't do it while you're driving. There's so many different modalities of meditation. There's so many of us, Leanne, I'm sure you teach meditation. I know we do here at Unity. We have meditation times and practices and all of that. Come and explore that, because that is where you will begin to discover your own spirit within. That's where you'll begin to discover your power. And once you begin to do that, then these outer things don't affect you the same. Another helpful thing is get around people who are in a different mindset. Get around people who are not living in fear. And I'm going to be honest. Yes, there are times I look at something and go, oh my gosh, really? And I feel it, but we have the tools to work through it. It's not that we deny what's going on in the world. We don't. Like I said, change comes from within out, not top down. But you have to get within first. That's where it starts. So get around like-minded people. If it be Unity or somewhere else, get around people who are positive, who are working towards change, who are seeing that there's a lot of good happening in the world right now. There really is. You don't hear about it in the media.
Yeah.
But there's people coming together and people working together and people helping each other in ways that has never happened before. There are communities that are coming together, like in the Middle East, Muslims, Jews, Christians, and others all coming together as one community. But you won't hear about it on the news. You're not going to hear about it in mainstream media. But get with people who are in that consciousness, who are part of being the change. Get a meditation practice and breathe. The most important thing. And realize it's not as bad as it sounds. It's bad, yes, but bad is temporary. Bad can change. Bad does change, always, and it always leads to greater good.
Everything you said is 100% what I teach. I teach it from personal experience. When I was in my PTSD and anxiety, as I mentioned, it was during the pandemic. So being even hearing the news, even close by, or in any kind of conversation with people, I had to separate myself from that toxicity so that I could calm my own nervous system and not live in a world of fear. And the number one thing that I did to start doing that was to develop a daily meditation habit, which I had never meditated before. I had done yoga, but I wasn't doing yoga for the spirituality side of it or for the breath work. I was doing it more for the physical side to improve my balance or stability or to be in community, but I was still missing that piece. And I didn't have anybody to teach me how to meditate because it was during the pandemic, but I had YouTube and I learned. coming from somebody that swore I couldn't quiet my mind, to loving the silence, to loving the peace, to living in my spirituality, and learning about breath work and all the beauty that comes with breath work, from being able to calm any anxieties at a moment's notice. It is something we all possess. It is free, and you can do it anywhere. And also to utilize those two tools together for pain, to be able to breathe into pain in a certain part of my body, to be able to do an inventory of what my body is feeling, or an area that may be tight, and know that I have the power to breathe and relax and focus on that spot and release that into the earth below me, or to be able to trust that my body is 100% supporting me, and I can sit for 30, 40 minutes in silence and know that I'm not going to fall over, know that there is something holding me there. So everything you said is 100% the best tools that we can all possess, and surround yourself with the right like-minded people. That was also a big piece of my learning and unlearning, and setting boundaries, and focused on who I was spending time with, and were those people serving my purpose, or were they harming my purpose, keeping me from growing, and all of those things. So you were right on it. 5 stars all across the board. Thank you so much for sharing those, and reminding people that they are all things that are available to us, either in person or virtually.
Watching podcasts like this.
Podcasts are a great way to learn what's available out there, and find those like-minded people and communities,
and ideas.
Your work is truly inspiring. How can people connect with you?
You can go to our website at uscabq.org. You can go to our Facebook page at facebook.com/uscabq. And if you want to check us out, what we do on Sundays, we do stream on Facebook our services. It's live at 10 o'clock, and then it's on there as it stays on the page after that. You can also on our website get just the lesson if you don't want to watch all the whole service. We have I'll be doing a class tonight called The Christ, and it's not the Christ that lived 2,000 years ago. It's that Christ within us. It's discovering what that is, the truth of who we are, and how we bring that out. And that's always, those classes are available on Zoom. So if you're interested, shoot me an email at ministerabqunity.org, and I'll get you on there if you want. And let's see what else. You can go to our Instagram, or you can join us in person. Our office hours are Tuesday through Thursday, 10 to 4. My door is always open unless I'm doing a podcast like right now, or with somebody in counseling. But either myself or Michael, my minister in training, Michael Small, he's a great person to talk to. Our office manager, Glenda, she's wonderful. she's a counselor in her own right. There's many of us here during the day. We have all week long, we have Tai Chi yoga in the morning. We have meditations. We have one of the things we'll be doing, we do once a month. This Saturday is Kirtan. If you're not familiar with that, that's call and repeat chanting. It's a meditation practice, but it's a musical meditation practice. And it's very powerful. It's out of the Buddhist and Hindu traditions, but it encompasses all traditions, and or non-traditions. And it's powerful. It's using music mostly in Sanskrit, so you don't have to think about the words. They're easy to do. They're up on a screen, so you don't have to worry about that. And really going within, using the vibration, because ultimately everything's about energy and vibration. You know, Nikola Tesla said, if you want to understand the universe, think in terms of vibration, frequency, and energy, I believe is what he said. I may not have it exactly right, but you know, uh, spirituality and quantum physics are basically the same thing, you know, and it's all about shifting vibration. So we have that available. We have contemplative gatherings. We have, I could go on for a long time. We have lots and lots available. And if you're not here in Albuquerque, well, you can tune into us electronically many times, but there's unity centers around the country and around the world. And if you need help finding one, just give us a call at 505-292-1998.
Perfect. I will do my best to include as much of that as possible in the show notes. Of course, you know, your website has got the majority of it all right there. So it's just taking the time to look through it and see all the wonderful things that you do. But I will definitely add some more stuff to the show notes that I have here. What a heart expanding conversation. Your message stirred something within me. If it stirred something within you, remember that curiosity and having a sense of peace and knowing you are not alone in feeling like something big is unfolding in our world. Whether you're stepping into your spiritual power for the first time, or if you've been on this path for years, know that your heart-centered presence matters. You are not just witnessing change, you are the change. If today's episode resonated with you, please share it with somebody who could use a little more hope and a whole lot more love and light in their life. And as always, subscribe, leave a review, let us know what moved you. And until next time, keep your happiness on tap and your heart wide open. Thank you again so much, Reverend Gordon, for joining me today and sharing your teachings, your knowledge, your beliefs, your light, your love, and everything that you make available to those who need it.
Well, thank you. It was an honor, and I look forward to being with you again.
I would love that very much. I would love that very much.
Thank you.